Witam Państwa w programie. Naszym gościem dzisiaj jest Glenn Jorgensen, Duńczyk, Polak i członek komisji, która zajmuje się badaniem katastrofy smoleńskiej. Dzień dobry.
Dzień dobry.
What is the importance of Frank Taylor's statement on the works of the commission?
This is a big breakthrough in the investigation. And the reason this is big breakthrough is the authority that Frank Taylor has behind him. He's not just an ordinary crash investigator, but he's the former director of the crash investigation program at Cranfield University, which I am attending, and it's regarded the world's best program. They come from all over the world. I have colleagues there from Australia, Malaysia, any country, almost except the US. I think they had one or two, because NTSB has their own program. But he's, besides this, one of 35 fellow members of the international community of crash investigators.
What is the Frank Taylor's experience in the field?
Frank Taylor has more than 44 years' experience within crash investigations. He's the father of modern crash investigation, for, as I said, for the program of crash investigators, and he's worked very close with AAIB. He's had hands-on investigation experience with a number of crashes. And he's also one of about 40 people in the world who have received the highest award for crash investigators, which is the Jeremy F. Leader Award. He received this for his outstanding work and as a recognition of his experience within crash investigation and this investigation program for teaching other investigators. So many of the world's crash investigators have been educated through his program. This is this caliber we are speaking of. And Frank Taylor's statement is a breakthrough in our investigation because he so clearly said what the evidence is pointing towards.
Can we follow the path of reasoning on which Frank Taylor provided his statement?
Absolutely, and the path will be written in detail, because if I were to explain this here, it would take a long time, because we have been providing Frank Taylor with evidence over a long period of time. But last week, when he came to Warsaw to have his own look at our evidence gathered together, he could ask questions, he could dig into any area he wanted. He looked at photos from the wing, he looked at photos of the door rammed into the ground, he looked at photos of the wreckage spread over the wreckage site. He digged into the reconstruction that people in our committee have made, very fine reconstruction of the wing mainly. And he was examining how accurately this was put together.
What are the signs that tells us that there was an explosion within the hull of an aircraft?
Well, the evidence that the crash investigator will be looking for are the classic signs of explosion. We will show a picture in a moment of such, taken from the handbook for forensic investigations.
Let's say our viewers what we see on this picture.
We see the curling of what they call petalled area. If you have an explosion inside a sheet metal construction, you will typically have some curling of the edges that break out. And curling for more than 360 degrees is regarded as a signature of explosion. By signature, this is defined as something that can only be explained by explosion. And you have other characteristic features which can happen also in, say, an ordinary impact damage. But when they are found together with the signature of explosion, they become very strong supporting evidence of explosion. And for the wing, we have a number of curlings, more than 360 degrees.
Let's see now the picture that we have from the wreckage. It's a picture taken in May or in April 2010.
So this is the picture of the wingtip we are showing here, and it's showing at the bottom you'll see a number of what we call curled edges. Typically, if you have an explosion hitting the edge of a piece of metal, the momentum will form this curl, and it tells you in what direction the curling gives you information of the type of explosion. Besides this, there are the characteristic signs of zipping along the rivet lines. You have the clean separation of parts. You have the lack of witness marks inside the wing box. There are a number of more or less strong characteristic signs of explosion.
If we see this picture in more detail, we will see the features you are describing right now.
Yes, and I want to say that this picture I'm showing here is only one out of more than hundreds of pictures that Frank Taylor investigated. And I'm just showing this because it's one we had already prepared for earlier program, but we can show many similar. And another area that had Frank's concern was the leading edge, because the leading edge, this is the edge in front of the wing. If hitting an obstacle, there should be the signs of hitting from this obstacle. And these signs, in Frank's opinion, were absent. The damage he saw on the front edge, he explains, and we'll show the clip where he's saying this damage can only be explained by the explosion. So he sees actually not only one explosion, but there most likely were several explosions in the wing.
Posłuchajmy teraz wypowiedzi Franka Taylora na temat przyczyn katastrofy smoleńskiej.
I think the evidence of looking at many photographs of parts from the wing, from the fuselage, the doors, and so forth, and seeing how they've been reconstructed here, but being able to see the original photographs as well, I have no doubt whatever that there was an explosion in there, and that the vast majority of that damage can only be explained by an explosion. Thereafter, of course, pieces fall and it can hit other things, but there are classic signs of an explosion. And as I say, that damage, the curling away from the explosion from a particular point, cannot be explained in any other way. And similarly, indeed, the leading edge, the slat, that appears to be, as far as I can see, only explained by internal pressure. And of the other things at the moment, just the spread of wreckage and the fact that the centre part is very badly fragmented with insulation material spread around, whereas normal speed accident like this, far more of it would have been intact, more or less intact, and with the inner and outer skins together. And of course the passenger door just in front of the wing leading edge, which was driven into the ground, that could not possibly happen by just the aircraft hitting the ground. It just isn't possible.
Mm-hmm. And how about the famous birch tree? Do you have any opinion why it is broken?
Well, it's possible that something hit it, but it certainly wasn't this wing, from front to back. There's no doubt about that in my mind. I've always doubted the tree itself didn't look as if it was been hit by anything solid, and even some of the earlier photographs before I saw this did not look as if the wing had hit the tree. But I was not convinced. I remained with an open mind until I saw this and saw the actual damage in more detail with the pieces. The front of this, the leading edge of this wing, certainly did not hit the birch tree. I could be quite certain of that. It would be very, very surprising if any professional investigator came to any other conclusion.
What were the reactions of the professional crash investigations on this particular speech of Frank Taylor?
On this particular speech, I think, for whatever reason, this hasn't been communicated out in the media as it should. I would have expected such a statement from this authority would have been on headlines 24/7 on all news channels. Unfortunately, it's not like this. I'm not the expert within media, so I cannot answer why. But I can tell you what my colleagues said to me when showing them some of the same material. For instance, this picture we showed to the viewers, and we're talking high-profile investigators. These are some who have been leading the top investigations of the past, and they said within few minutes and they supported 100% Frank Taylor, that this could only be created by high internal pressure. They wouldn't use the word explosion because they are modest. They said high internal pressure, which means explosion. So they are confirming his, and this is we have this confirmation from two high-profile authorities, and Frank didn't know of this when he was reaching his conclusion. We let him work independently on his own, and this is the way Frank Taylor works. Nobody can pay Frank Taylor to say anything. He makes up his own mind based on the evidence. And this is very important. This is why he's this high authority that he is.
The wingtip explosion was not only one explosion that happened on this airplane.
No. Frank Taylor concludes that there were a number of explosions in the wing, but above the ground, before the plane hits the ground, were additional explosion, maybe explosions, we don't know, but at least one explosion sending the door into the ground. And the door into the ground is very important for several reasons. First of all, the door is separated from the frame. In Frank's opinion, this can only happen as a result of a high internal pressure. The other thing is we know from the National Institute of Aviation Research in the US, which is the highest authority within calculating these kinds of things, they reached the conclusion that the speed of this door had to be more than 125 meters per second. Why is this important? Because 125 meters per second vertical speed is about 10 times more higher speed than the plane was approaching. Now, you have to remember one thing, which is very important when understanding the impact of a crash. If an airplane, and I'll use this 727 model, it's not the forward speed that is killing people, it's the vertical speed. The forward speed, if you're approaching at a shallow angle, it will mean you'll be sliding over the ground and the plane will eventually lose all its energy. But the vertical speed is the one that gives you the big impact. The vertical speed in our case was maybe 12 meters, maybe 16 meters per second. So this is like about 10 times more speed of this door into the ground, which means it had to have 100 times more energy. You can ask yourself, where could this energy come from? Energy doesn't just come by itself. So the hypothesis is the high internal explosion said the pressure from this sent the door into the ground, and it agrees with the position of the aircraft at this moment. You have the left passenger door. This is this door here on the Tupolev, and the airplane was probably approaching in this direction, just above the ground. At the point where this is found, the ground trace stops from this wing. So you have the scratching from the left wing. You have the scratching from the tail section. And at this moment, when this door is rammed into the ground, the scratches stop, and you just find a scattering of a huge amount of pieces. And the number of pieces is another piece of evidence that Frank Taylor is addressing in his speech, the clip that we will show for the public.
He basically says that the number of small pieces means that there was some force that ripped apart the fuselage and the elements of the airplane.
He has 44 years of experience within crash investigation, and he knows what he's talking about when he says the number of parts and the way the airplane is hitting the ground. You have a long list of airplanes who have hit the ground in similar way, and they break up into 3, 4, 5 pieces. Typically a piece here over, because this is very stiff section over the wing, so it breaks here. This section has lots of mass, can break here, and the cockpit. So you have like maybe 5 big sections and some small pieces, but not like 60,000 small fragments. I mean,
This is the airplane, the 727, that was destroyed by Discovery Network in 2011. I believe there is a movie on it, and it actually breaks in 3 to
Yes.
4 points with 99% of the crew and passengers alive.
so the distribution of the wreckage over the wreckage site is one important piece of evidence for Frank when he's making his conclusion. The door into the ground. He mentions a list of important things for him, and I think we can show this for the public. He says also very clearly that the leading edge of the wing, in this area where previous conclusions were made that it hit a birch tree, so no sign whatsoever of being hit by the birch tree. This damage, he says, can only be made by explosion. It certainly wasn't the birch tree. So he's putting away the birch tree once and for all.
So, to sum up this discussion, we are finally past the version of incompetent pilots, birch tree, the general in the cockpit. We are talking about the real reasons why the Tupolev was destroyed in the airport of Smolensk.
I think if you're driving your car and you have a bomb in your car and you pass, let's say you passed the yellow light. Maybe you didn't, maybe you did. But discussion if you passed yellow or green light when arriving and the car exploded has no importance for the effect of the explosion in the car. So no matter what these pilots did, if they were, I believe they were competent, very competent pilots. What we have data shows that they were competent pilots. But at the end of the day, this disaster would happen no matter what these pilots did. This is very important to understand.
Glenn, thank you very much for this conversation. Dziękuję bardzo za przyjście do studia i naświetlenie nam szczegółów wystąpienia i opinii Franka Taylora. Myślę, że po tym wiemy troszkę więcej na temat przyczyn i prac komisji, która zajmuje się wyjaśnieniem wypadku w Smoleńsku.